Hello and welcome back to the Winning Agenda. My name's Jesse Muehlman-Marshall and I'm here with Ira Fay, who is, we can, I think, announce now, the league champion for the Tournament of Champions. Congratulations, Ira.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Yeah, how does it feel? You won the previous season of the league and now the Tournament of Champions, which is the end of year tournament to sort of cap it all off. How are you feeling about all that?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I think it was a good tournament. It was, as far as I know, the biggest tournament of constructed sorcery in the world to date. So that's a fun record to have, and I look forward to it being broken relatively soon
Hmm.
by many other events. But it was nice for now.
Yeah, there are a few big live constructed events coming up in the next little while, which is really exciting to see, isn't it? Are you going to be heading along to any of the ones in the States?
I will not be able to make it to any of the ones coming up soon, but hopefully Gen Con, if not something even sooner than that.
Awesome. Oh, that's exciting. And Ira, we should say as well, just as an intro, I've mentioned a few times on the channel all the work that you put into the league for sorcery and how it's just been a fantastic opportunity, both before we had the physical cards delivered and then since then as well, for people to test the meta out and push the boundaries and play in a bit more of a competitive environment. So, firstly, thank you for doing that. But secondly, did you want to talk to us a little bit about what that's been like?
Yeah, thanks for asking, and thanks for the kind words. Yeah, it's really an incredible community. I mean, it's a totally free league, so anybody can join. And Tabletop Simulator is the software we use, which costs $20 to buy, but people have donated money. So if anybody needs help, buying it, if they can't buy it for themselves, then we have the funds for that too. So it's really been a lot of generosity from the community, and exactly as you said. I mean, I started it because I wanted to play sorcery in a slightly more competitive environment. It's still pretty chill and pretty relaxed, but it is. I think it draws a level of interest in brewing new decks and exciting decks and just getting to play for fun with people who are pretty into the game, and that's fun. It's nice for me. So happy to be a part of
Yeah.
it.
Oh, that's really cool. And I should say as well today at the outset that one of the things we're going to do, you can probably see from what I've got up on the screen here, is Ira's deck list from the final or from the Tournament of Champions. And what we're going to do is talk through that with Ira and get Ira's thoughts on some of the card choices and the metagame as a whole. But before we do that, just on the league moving forward, if people want to play in the league, Ira, there's another season coming up pretty shortly. I'm going to put a link to the league Discord in the video description. Do you want to just kind of describe for us what a season looks like if someone was thinking about joining for season 4?
Yeah, so there are a lot of ways to run leagues, and one of the main goals that I had for the design of the league is that it would be very easy for people to join late or drop out if it turns out life gets busy. So it's a very low commitment, free to enter, all of that. So basically, when the season starts, I process registration from anybody who's registered. But if you want to join late, you watch this video a month from now, you can still join. It's fine. And the basic idea is that one season runs for around 7 weeks, something like that. It varies a little bit based on whatever the calendar is doing, but around 7 weeks. And the expectation is that if you want to be sort of an active player in the league, then during those 7 weeks, you'll play 8 games, something like that. And so you can play fewer. It's totally fine. And you can play more. That's also fine. But we sort of set 8 as the sort of active player threshold. And if you've played 8, then you get eligible for the various participation prizes that we have. And because of the generosity of people who are signing up or donating to it, we have quite a few participation prizes available. Just even if you lose all 8 of your games, you still get to be eligible for that. And I think people have really enjoyed that aspect of it too. And then if you do well, if you win a bunch of games, then we have a top cut, and then there's a sort of a league championship or a season championship tournament at the end of those 7 weeks of regulation play. Then we have some number of people in a top cut tournament and do that as well. So that's sort of the structure of the season.
And one of the features that I've really enjoyed about the way the leagues run is that you, no matter where you are in the world, different time zones, you can just post that you're looking for a game, and as long as you haven't played against the person already who responds, then you can play your match whenever it suits you, rather than having to have scheduled matches against particular opponents, which you then have to organise with them and their time zone, which can be a bit of a pain with some of these online leagues.
Yeah, we really have a worldwide community, and you can just play whatever you want to play. That's absolutely one of the design goals. And as you mentioned, you can only play each person once per season. And so it sort of encourages this intermixing of the community. You get to see a lot of different decks. You get to play against a lot of different players and play styles. And that's a lot of fun for me. And it seems like that's resonating well with the community too.
Awesome. So we might just dive into your deck list, Ira. So this was something that you've been working on for a couple of seasons now. Did you play Death Speaker in season 2 as well, or have you played it in all seasons?
Right. And yeah, this is good to note. So when you're playing in the regulation season, you can change your deck whenever you want. There's no commitment to a certain deck. It's only in the tournaments where we've leaned towards having people submit deck lists in advance. So I've played quite a bit of Death Speaker. I also played Avatar of Earth a good amount, and I've experimented with Pathfinder and Seer a bit. But I just felt like Death Speaker was the most sort of well-rounded, and I enjoyed it. It's a fun deck to play for me.
Certainly lots of choices and lots of decisions to make throughout each game, isn't it?
Yeah, quite a few options.
So what I've got up here on the screen, Ira, is your deck list, and I'm just going to scroll through. Unfortunately, Ira can't see this as I'm scrolling through it on the video screen, but I'm sure that you're familiar with your deck list, and you can just talk us through sort of from top to bottom some of the key card choices. I might just sort of throw a couple at you, and you can perhaps talk to the audience a bit about how they made it into the deck, what role they play, and what they do for the overall game plan. But before we do that, do you want to sort of describe for us, for those who are completely unfamiliar with Death Speaker as an archetype and as a hero or avatar in sorcery, what is it? What is the aim of this deck, and what's this deck trying to do?
Yeah, so this deck is definitely going for the long game, and through card advantage from the Death Speaker ability, which lets you replay cards, either yours or your opponent's, from their cemetery, and you get the Genesis effect. So basically almost every card in the deck, every minion in the deck has a Genesis ability that is quite powerful. And there's one card that doesn't have a Genesis ability that I included in the deck because I just think it's so good. But in general, I'm looking for Genesis abilities in the Death Speaker deck, and because of the card advantage that you get from that, you can really play the long game. As long as you survive the early game, then almost always in the long game you'll be able to win against most decks. There are a few decks that pose a problem in the long game also, which I can talk about, but that's sort of the overall goal of the deck.
So some of those Genesis abilities that you're trying to leverage from the Death Speaker, you'll see a lot of Death Speaker decks playing the Wizards, the Grandmaster Wizard and the Apprentice Wizard. Grandmaster Wizard and the Apprentice Wizard both have this Genesis ability that lets you draw a spell. So Apprentice Wizard is draw one spell and Grandmaster Wizard is draw three. How key are they in the deck?
Yeah, I think Grandmaster Wizard is particularly key because it's just a lot of efficiency for a single card to get to draw 3 more. But really, it's like 6 more because you get to cast it twice after it dies. And then sometimes it's like 9 more because you return it to your hand with Fey Changeling, or you kill it and then bring it back with Boneyard. And one of the things that drew me to Death Speaker, in addition to the card advantage, is the catch-up mechanic when you're at death's door. And some of the most exciting games that I've played are when I'm at death's door, and then it turns on this incredibly powerful Death Speaker ability to not only play the card from the cemetery as you've been the whole game, but to play it for free. And so you get to play the Grandmaster Wizard for free. You're on death's door, so you might you're close to losing. You might lose, but it's an exciting moment, and it gives you some real opportunities for coming back. So Grandmaster Wizard is super key. I think Apprentice Wizard, in my mind, for this deck is in many ways very similar to the Land Surveyor, because you are drawing one card from it. So, and effectively two, because you're going to get to play it again after it dies. But the benefit of the Apprentice Wizard giving the spellcaster ability is worth something, but is not necessarily that vital in this deck. Usually the game is going long enough that the specific positioning of my spellcasters are not that key. Like the Firebolts are the ones that, or the Disenchants are the ones that could matter the most. And so it is nice to be able to play them as spellcasters out on the board to do the things they need to do. But in general, I'm playing my Apprentice Wizards in the same site as my avatar, so that I can do shenanigans with the Philosopher's Stone, which
talk us through that one a little bit, because there's some coverage coming out of the Tournament Champions final match of you against Salem, and there was a turn there where you passed your Philosopher's Stone over to a Grandmaster Wizard to reset the discounts and use them again. Do you want to sort of talk our viewers through that for those who haven't used that particular trick?
Yeah, so each unit, each turn, can drop artifacts once and can pick up artifacts once. So your avatar, which is presumably holding the Philosopher's Stone, can cast some spells. Maybe it casts an earth spell and then casts an air spell. And you got a discount for the earth and you got a discount for the air. And then you want to cast another earth spell, and it wouldn't be at a discount. But, you have this Philosopher's Stone lying around. You could share it with your wizard, who's also a spellcaster. So you can have your avatar drop the Philosopher's Stone. The wizard picks up the Philosopher's Stone, and then the wizard, who has not yet cast any spells this turn, casts their first spell, which is an earth spell. And so that wizard gets a discount from that same Philosopher's Stone. And then you're able to basically get the discount again, even though it's the same element that you've already cast with your avatar.
And it's a different bearer. Yeah.
It's a different bear and it's a different spellcaster. And then when you pass it back to your avatar, the wizard can drop it and then your avatar can pick it up. When your avatar is then carrying it again, you said the word reset, and I just want to be clear. It's not like the game is tracking that your avatar has cast Earth again, so you won't be able to have your avatar cast another Earth spell that turn, but you are getting the benefit multiple times if you have the wizards there. And the other thing that I'll mention is that with this deck, you have to be a little careful because only the Death Speaker can be the caster when you're casting from the cemetery. So you have to make sure that when you're using your Philosopher's Stone and you want to do this trick, you have to have the avatar cast the Death Speaker ability from the cemetery. The wizard can't use that ability.
Yeah, it's something I think a lot of players overlook is the ability of spellcasters to cast things other than magics, because I think a lot of people get their head around the idea that a spellcaster can cast a Firebolts, but it's not immediately necessarily clear to newer players that a spellcaster can also cast a Violimp from your hand.
Right, from your hand. Exactly. And normally that doesn't matter. It only matters, really, as far as I know, primarily for this Philosopher's Stone issue. And I will say, in your top 10 list, you've put Philosopher's Stone as the, one of the top or the top card in the set right now. And I agree with that assessment because it can save you so much mana. And especially if you build your deck to be 4 elements, which I did on purpose, you can get just an incredible amount of savings from the Philosopher's Stone. And if anybody is looking to counterplay against this deck, getting rid of the Philosopher's Stone is a very good strategy for keeping this deck under control, because without the Philosopher's Stone, it's still good, but it's much more fair because you're not saving 2, 3, 4, 5 mana in a turn from the Philosopher's Stone.
It's an incredible amount of efficiency, and watching that finals game and playing other Death Speaker decks myself, sometimes you are double, triple, quadruple spelling on turns where if you didn't have the stone, you might be able to play 2, maybe even sometimes 1 of those spells, which is an astonishing difference, between playing 1 or 2 and playing 4 spells. The utility you get out of those 4 spells on that turn when you need them is massive.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. So some of the other Genesis abilities in the deck that you've got, you've chosen Fey Changeling, Raytanis Titan, and Land Surveyor you touched on earlier. You might come back to the Changeling and the Titan, but Land Surveyor is something, as I've played more Death Speaker decks, I've come to enjoy how it gives you the flexibility to never have to draw a site necessarily. As long as you've got an Earth site and a Land Surveyor in your opening hand of sites, and then a Land Surveyor in your first 5 or 6 spells, it can mean that you can get up to, with a single Land Surveyor, you can get up to 5 sites without having to draw one at the start of your turn. And then with 2 Land Surveyors, you can get up to 7 sites without having to draw one, which may be all you need for the game. Is that your thinking when you have 4 in the deck, that's something you want those Land Surveyors to enable you to do, to never have to really draw sites at the start of your turn if possible?
Yeah, I mean, if you are able to generate a site from the Genesis effect, then that means at the start of your turn you're able to draw a spell. And in general with this deck, you want to be playing a site every turn. You don't really want to be tapping the Death Speaker to draw a site. So if I'm in a situation where, I have a choice between either missing my site for the turn, I'm not going to be able to play a site this turn, or drawing at the start of the turn, I'll probably draw the site at the start of the turn, unless I have, a lot of mana, more than 10 mana. But this deck can really make use of quite a lot of mana through the Fey Changeling, replaying cards, and being able to cast from the cemetery, from either cemetery. So the value of getting to even 9 sites is not unreasonable. And so I often find the Land Surveyor is pretty useful. And part of this deck strategy is to have small minions that can soak up attacks from larger minions. And so while the grapple shot may hit my avatar, my Land Surveyor is standing by, ready to block or ready to defend the attack. And that's important. So having those little minions in there is a useful thing.
So there's probably 2 others that I wanted to ask about, sort of why you've included them and what the value they bring in. There's a couple of Genesis abilities that are very popular that you haven't got in the deck that I also want to touch on. So the Fey Changeling and the Raytanis Titan, why did they make the cut? You've spoken a bit about the bouncing and replaying.
Yeah, so Fey Changeling is very flexible because it can, in a matchup where, for instance, Avatar of Earth, where the Avatar of Earth is playing things like Phalanx or Pudge Butcher, you can play your Fey Changeling for 3 or maybe 2 with Philosopher's Stone, and very profitably keep them off their additional attack. And so it's a good way of controlling minions in that sort of matchup, but then also in a slower matchup where you have more time, you can use it for your own units. So, and the fact that it's a water minion, I want to try and have an even distribution of elements to get maximum value out of the Philosopher's Stone. So that's one of the other reasons. And then the other thing I'll say is it works as a defense against infiltrate. So there are a few units in the deck, particularly the Ruler of Thule and the Raytanis Titan, where if those minions get infiltrated, I'm not very happy about that. That's pretty bad for me. And so having the Fey Changeling ready to then return them to my hand, get rid of the infiltrate effect, that's one of the reasons why I kept Fey Changeling in.
That's a very easy one to miss, I guess, because that only matters. That ability of Fey Changeling that it doesn't target, it's just a minion here, so it doesn't target, is something that doesn't come up all that often except with stealth, and Infiltrate's a great example of when that's really important from a stealth perspective.
Yep.
Cool. So some Genesis abilities that are popular that aren't in the deck, things like Death Dealer, which actually I've recently moved to the sideboard of my Death Speaker deck as well because of the way the metagame is. But what are your thoughts on Death Dealer and where that's positioned at the moment?
Yeah, I had Death Dealer in here for a long time, and I still wonder, it might be better to have it in. I mean, you'll see in the finals against Zalem that he used Death Dealer very effectively against me.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I had it in the deck for so long, and I just found that it was, if I had to play Death Dealer, probably something has already gone pretty badly wrong. And I found that my play style tended to, and I think there are other ways of building the deck where it could be very effective, and it's pretty useful to be able to wipe the board of minions twice. But and the 7 mana isn't really a problem in this deck. You can get up to 7 mana pretty fast. The issue for me was my play style tended to want to have a bunch of little minions around for a while and build up, and so I would end up trading a couple of my minions for a couple of their bigger minions, and then I'd end up with a Death Dealer, which was fine, but it didn't necessarily win games. And I found that Ruler of Thule, that card really let me win games in a way that the Death Dealer helped stabilize the board, but didn't necessarily lead to a win immediately. And Ruler of Thule really does lead to wins very quickly.
That's really interesting. And the other one that's probably worth picking up is Violent, which I think is just the core of so many Death Speaker strategies. I can't remember if I put it in my top 16 list, but it probably deserves to be there.
You did. You did.
Yeah, the ability to deal damage to unit, so including avatars, and to take out enemy 2-power minions without costing yourself a card effectively, to me is just crazy and limits my other deck building. Whenever I'm considering putting a 2-power minion into a deck, I think, but dies to Violent kind of situation. It's almost achieved that status in the metagame. Is that how you feel about it? And you've got 4 in the deck. Is that kind of why you've included it?
Yeah, it's an incredibly efficient card. It can trade with much bigger units. So, against an Autumn Unicorn 4 power, it can attack into the Unicorn, and then it's in your cemetery, and then you can replay it, and now you've done 4 damage to a unit to a minion to get rid of it that way. The other thing you can do is with an avatar like Battle Mage or against Avatar of Earth, you play your imp wherever their avatar is. You do 2 damage to their avatar, and then they have to attack into it. And now they're taking 2 more, and they still haven't damaged you. So a lot of the early game for this deck is just getting out your little minions to soak up attacks. But the Violent is against something like Avatar of Earth or Battle Mage, which those are still prevalent in the meta. It's quite effective against them.
I often feel if I'm playing those decks against a Death Speaker deck like this, a lot of the time it comes down to, do they have a Violent on turn 2, as to how the early game goes in particular and how the tempo progresses. Cool. So one of the other ones that's super interesting in this deck is Atlantean Fate, and it was another one from the top 16 list that I highlighted. I think I had it in the top 8 somewhere as one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, water spells in the game. What does it do for you in this deck, and what are your thoughts on it as a card generally?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's really good. So I think one of the and that's I think one of the main reasons to go water. I mean, Atlantean Fate is that good that it's worth the games that you will lose because you didn't get your elements all sorted out and you happen to have a bad run of luck with your sight draws. You will lose some games that way because of that, or you'll really struggle in some games because of that. But the games that you win because of it outweigh the costs, in my opinion, for Atlantean Fate. And it's like Earthquake. Of course, you can often get 2 targets with it. And on top of that, Atlantean Fate messes with their thresholds. So I'm quite scared actually facing Atlantean Fate in my deck because there's so few ordinary sites that Atlantean Fate can really mess with me quite a lot.
So and then submerging the artifacts is something else you mentioned about the finals game, that game 1. Yeah. You played that tower on turn 1 just to be immune from Atlantean Fate taking out your Philosopher's Stones and things, because that's such a powerful effect.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and I don't know if we're going to get a chance to talk about sites, but I just want to call out Floodplain as being a real star and something that I think water decks can really take advantage of, because you can, with a single floodplain, effectively have 2 water threshold because you're able to flood your own sites with your own floodplain. And then for that turn, you have 2 water threshold. And so you can play Atlantean Fate with a single floodplain.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I had most decks that I've built that include water are majority water, and I hadn't even thought of that. But that's awesome. That's really, really cool. And
Yeah,
then,
and floodplain,
yeah, sorry, you go.
oh, I just want to say, I mean, floodplain I really love because it can do so many things. So one of the things floodplain can do is if you want to earthquake yourself and you're on a earth site or a land site, you can floodplain the site that you're on, earthquake, not burrow not burrow your own units because now it's water for your turn. So it's a way to sort of protect your own units and your own artifacts if you depending on the positioning of where you want to play earthquake. Another thing you can do with floodplain is if there are any pesky root spiders nearby, you can just flood it. And now there are no pesky root spiders nearby because they can't live underwater. So that's another great thing that floodplain can do. And you can even like earthquake your floodplain into position near the root spider and then drown them. So there are there's a lot of things you can do. And then the one other thing I'll say about floodplain is sometimes people knowing that you have Atlantean Fate will put their units on an ordinary site thinking that they're safe. But if you flood it with floodplain first and then play Atlantean Fate, now, yes, it's an ordinary site, but it's still an affected site. And so it still gets submerged when the genesis happens with Atlantean Fate. So floodplain is really, I do not think this deck would work as well as it did without floodplain because I think Ruler of Thule and Atlantean Fate add so much to it. So shout out to awesome. Floodplains.
Big shout out to floodplain. Any other in the Atlas, any other cards you want to shout out? I know you shouted out Boneyard as a great way to get that value back from Grandmaster Wizard. But anything else in there you think players who are thinking of piloting this deck should be particularly aware of?
Yeah, I mean, Boneyard is great. And in particular, the Death Speaker, you can remember that you can cast their minions from their cemetery. So if you have a turn where you have some extra mana, you can cast their Unicorn, their Pudge Butcher. You can cast basically any minion because you have all 4 thresholds. And you can clear out their cemetery, even though that Pudge Butcher is not going to do anything for you when it arrives because it doesn't have a Genesis ability and then it'll get banished, you're still getting it out of their cemetery, which is useful because when they inevitably play Pillar of Zeros, it won't gain them life. But also when you play your Boneyard, they won't be able to bring it back. So the Death Speaker, ironically, is, I think, very well positioned to use Boneyard well. And I guess that's not ironic. It just makes sense.
Yeah, it's a random deck.
Yeah. So Boneyard makes sense. I guess the only other thing I'll mention, 2 other things. There's a lot of variety of sites intentionally, so that depending on your matchup and depending what you're looking for, you can often control what you're going to play in a very thoughtful manner. And because you probably have land surveyors, you often have several sites to pick from at a given moment. And so I think that's a real power of this deck. River of Flame is quite good if you end up sideboarding in the Infiltrate, and I might go back to putting Infiltrate mainboard, but you can use River of Flame as a fire spellcaster and either cast Firebolts from it or cast Infiltrate from it, and that can be particularly useful if you want to infiltrate a underground unit, which otherwise you won't be able to touch. So those are some tricks with River of Flame.
Yeah, infiltrating underground units with River of Flame, that's chef's kiss. Well, that's really awesome, Ira. Thank you so much for running us through the deck. I know there are other cards, but we'll wrap it up there. And I think if people are interested, firstly, join the League Discord and get involved in Season 4. Secondly, once you're in the League Discord, Ira's there regularly. And if you've got any other questions about this deck, I'm sure Ira's really happy to discuss and talk the theory of Death Speaker with you, and give you some tips on how to play. Was there anything else you wanted to sort of say to the audience, either about the league or anything else, Ira, before we wrap up?
No, I hope that people join the league. It's totally free, and there's no commitment. So even if you sign up and play 0 games, that's totally fine. Come and play with us. It's a fun time. So awesome. Season 4 is starting up relatively soon.
Thanks so much for running it throughout 2023, and we look forward to all the seasons in 2024, and we'll see if you can defend your end-of-year crown next year.
Thanks so much.